Cop secretly follows lost dog, then he bursts into tears when he sees. Subscribe to my channel and like a video. Let's start the video. The rain fell in heavy sheets, turning the streets of Willow Creek into a blur of gray and silver. Officer Daniel Carter pulled his patrol car to the side of the road, rubbing his tired eyes. His shift had been long, filled with petty thefts and noise complaints. But something caught his attention as he was about to call it a night. A dog. A small, scruffy golden retriever mix, soaked to the bone, limped along the sidewalk. Its fur was matted, and its ribs were visible beneath its thin coat. Daniel's chest tightened. He'd seen stray dogs before, but something about this one, the way it kept looking back, as if waiting for someone, made him pause. He stepped out of the car, his boots splashing in the puddles. "Hey, buddy," he called softly. The dog froze, ears twitching, then bolted. Daniel hesitated. He should let animal control handle it, but something in the dog's desperate, determined trot made him follow. He climbed back into his car and drove slowly, keeping his distance, watching as the dog navigated the streets with surprising purpose. Asterisk. "Where are you going, little guy?" The dog led him across town, past the gas station, through an alley, and into a rundown neighborhood. The houses here were worn, some boarded up, others barely standing. Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel. He'd responded to calls in this area before. Domestic disputes, drug busts. Not the kind of place a lost dog should be wandering alone. Then the dog stopped. In front of a small, crumbling house with a sagging porch, the golden retriever sat down and whined. Daniel parked and stepped out, keeping his distance. The dog didn't run this time. It just stared at the front door, tail thumping weakly against the ground. A flicker of movement inside. A face appeared in the window. A little girl, no older than 6, her eyes wide with hope. The door burst open. "Max!" she cried, dropping to her knees. The dog let out a joyful bark and lunged forward, nearly knocking her over as he licked her face, his tail wagging furiously. The girl wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his wet fur. "You came back! I knew you would!" Daniel stood frozen, his throat tight. Then a woman appeared in the doorway, thin, exhausted, her eyes red from crying. She gasped when she saw the dog. "Oh, Max, how did you—" Then she noticed Daniel in his uniform and stiffened. "Ma'am," he said gently, raising a hand, "I just followed your dog here. He was wandering the streets." The woman's face crumpled. She hugged her daughter close as the little girl clung to Max. We had to let him go," she whispered. "We couldn't afford to keep him. My husband lost his job and—" Her voice broke. "We thought maybe someone else would take him in. But he must have run away from wherever we left him." The little girl looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I prayed every night he'd come home." Daniel's vision blurred. He remembered his own childhood dog, a scrappy mutt named Duke, who had been his only friend during his parents' divorce. He remembered the ache of coming home to an empty house, the way Duke would nudge his hand as if to say, "I'm still here." He crouched down, scratching Max behind the ears. The dog leaned into his touch, panting happily. "You've got a good boy here," he murmured. The little girl nodded fiercely. "He's the best." Daniel stood, wiping his eyes. He made a decision then, one that had nothing to do with protocol and everything to do with the knot in his chest. "Ma'am," he said, pulling out his wallet, "let me help." 2 hours later, Daniel pulled up to the house again, this time with bags of dog food, a new leash, and a vet's promise to waive Max's next checkup. He'd also made a few calls, pulling strings to get the family connected with a local food bank and job assistance program. The little girl, Lily, ran out to meet him, Max trotting proudly beside her. "You came back too," she exclaimed. Daniel smiled, ruffling her hair. "Of course I did." The mother, Sarah, stood on the porch, her hands clasped over her mouth. "Officer, we can't possibly—" "It's already done," he said softly. "Just take care of him, okay? And yourselves." As he turned to leave, Max suddenly darted forward, pressing his nose into Daniel's palm. The dog looked up at him with big, grateful eyes. Daniel knelt, stroking his head. "You take care of them, Max. They need you." The dog licked his hand once, then bounded back to Lily, who hugged him tightly. Daniel walked back to his car, his heart full. For the first time in years, he felt like he'd done something that truly mattered. And as he drove away, he didn't bother wiping the tears this time. Like a video and subscribe to my channel, please. Thanks for watching.